Welcome to Momentary Zen with Zen Garcia. Visit www.fallenangels.tv. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
My friends and I come from far Arden with secretive words, dangled like jewels for your careless pleasure. The grand highway is crowded with lovers and searchers and leavers, so eager to please and forget. Welcome, friends. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. And I'm honored to be here with you this evening for the next 2 hours as we discuss all things esoteric. Specifically, this evening, I want to clarify and speak about the determination of Sabbath, the feasts, and the festivals according to the exodus of Sabbath and how the Most High God had delivered to Moses and the Israelites during that time had given them the Enochian Lunar Calendar, which few know about and even fewer adhere to. And I discovered this and was led to this revelation in studying the Book of Enoch, the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries, which was the focus of my ninth book, The Flat Earth as Key to Decrypt the Book of Enoch. And in studying and reviewing those particular passages on the motions of the sun and the moon, I was led to understanding as to how the sun, the moon, and the other celestial luminaries take part in what is basically a giant clockwork, that the heavens are established and set up to be a timekeeping mechanism for the monitor and the maintenance of not only passing time, but also the Sabbath, and also the feast and festivals as laid out in Leviticus chapter 23. And this is something that, even though many of you being biblical scholars, unless you have familiarity with what I'm speaking about with regard to the Luni-solar calendar and how it works, it will escape you to make sense of what exactly the Most High is referencing in the Exodus, because it was during that time when the Israelites were freed as people from the bondage of Egypt and the burden of being slaves unto Pharaoh and the Egyptians, that they were not only reestablished as the Most High's chosen, but that he had also given to them the Torah as the law, but also this particular calendar system, which I'm speaking about. And it's something that is a miss. It's, as far as modern humanity, it is something that is forgotten, lost, and forbidden knowledge. And this teaching and this knowledge is especially important for those that are wanting to honor the fourth commandment and also to celebrate the Most High as he had commanded us to do according to his own word and works. And so I'm going to bring this forth to light for people, and I'm also going to help you to understand exactly how this lines up according to these particular passages, but also, how it unfolds. And for those of you that are familiar with my work and that have studied and kept up with the information that I released, you know that I've also made a particular calendar specifically to assist those of you that are wanting to adhere to the calendar as given to us by God, because He most certainly did give us this one specific calendar system, and He delivered it to Moses, and I'm going to verify and I'm going to prove that this evening. And once you understand that this is most certainly the calendar system which the ancient Hebrews abided by, well, then you can then understand why it is that one should use it as determination, or as the system for determining the Sabbaths, and also for determining on which days to honor and to celebrate the Levitical feast days, meaning Passover, unleavened bread, the day of first fruits, Shavuot, which is Pentecost, the Feast of Tabernacles, the Day of Atonement, and also the Feast of Trumpets, which that one should have been before the Day of Atonement. But anyways, and for a lot of people that believe that Yeshua came and did away with the Old Testament law, He actually came and fulfilled it. Not only did He fulfill it, but He will come. His second coming will fulfill the second half of the feasts and the festivals as laid out in Leviticus chapter 23. And so He actually honored the Sabbath and also the feast and festivals as laid out by Yahweh Elohim, the Most High God, in the early books of the Torah. And so, well, welcome everybody. It's good to be here with you. RBN, Sister Kathy, always a pleasure to share time with you. Comfortably Numb, Wanderer, RBN, Zaphod, Zippy, Link, Blues Girl, and April, all those that are not in the immediate scroll, Stephanie, Herbal Fuzz, Suri, Rio, and all those that are sitting in the background. It's good to share time with you, and again, I think this is a very important teaching, in that we are commanded through the fourth commandment, which, of the 10. I think it's very important to honor the Most High in the way that He told us to do so. And for most people that don't understand and don't know, and that go to church every Sunday thinking that, they are honoring the Sabbath, or for those that go to church on Saturday as the Seventh-day Adventists, or like the modern day Jews that celebrate Sabbath as from Friday at sundown to Saturday at sundown. According to this ancient calendar system, all of them are incorrect. And the reason being is because they all monitor and determine Sabbath according to the Julian Gregorian Solar Calendar, which basically aligns every sabbatical week back to back to back to back. meaning that the 7-day weeks, which are named according to the pagan gods, the celestial deities, as the hierarchy for the names of the week, um, they don't work like that according to the ancient Hebrew calendar. In fact, the ancient Hebrew calendar is aligned by the phases of the moon. And the very first day and the first Sabbath of each lunar month is situated according to what is called Chodesh. And Chodesh, meaning time of the new moon, is basically aligned to what people see as the very first sliver of a waxing crescent moon that is at least 7% full. And so this what's called a lot of times as a horn sliver, that this phase of moon begins the lunar month on God's calendar. And because um, God's calendar is aligned to the 4 phases of the moon, the monthly phases and cycles of the moon, it alternates in, as far as the days of the month, it alternates 29 days one month, 30 days the other month, and back and forth and vice versa. And the reason it does so is because the average, what is called the synodic month, the average um, for the moon to cycle through all 4 of its phases is 29.531 days. And so God had established this particular calendar system ingeniously to align with that particular average. And so when you understand that the Sabbaths are lined up according to the phases of the moon, you know that every Sabbath, the first Sabbath will always be that 7% waxing crescent moon. And then you have 6 days, and on the 8th of every lunar month, another Sabbath. And that Sabbath aligns with the first quarter moon. And then you have 6 more working days and another Sabbath, and that Sabbath aligns with the full moon. And then you have 6 more working days, and then the third Sabbath, which lines up with the third quarter moon. And then 6 more working days, and then the fifth Sabbath, which aligns with the lunar conjunction. And so every lunar month, according to God's calendar, lines up according to those phases of the moon. And so it becomes very simple to keep up with and to maintain and to keep track a Sabbath. All one has to do is go out and look at the phases of the moon. And then you know that on Chodesh, that's the beginning, the 7% waxing crescent moon, that's the beginning of the lunar month. And then the first quarter moon is the second Sabbath, the full moon, the third Sabbath, the third quarter moon, the fourth Sabbath, and the lunar conjunction, the fifth Sabbath. And this is the way it is every month on God's calendar, which, according to the Gregorian Solar Calendar, some months have 31 days, other months have 28 days. And so there's no congruency. But on God's calendar, no month ever exceeds 30 days. And no month is shorter than 29 days. And again, it's because that's how long it takes the moon to cycle through its 4 phases. 29.531 days on average. And so, anyways, I just want to explain this just a little bit. Hello, Patrick and Monkey, and um, so that when I go to actually reading some of the scriptures from Exodus, that you will understand this will be a background, a foundation for helping you to understand what I'm going to be speaking about this evening. Because once we go through this particular day, you'll understand how it is that the Most High gave them this calendar, and also how it aligns with not only scripture, but with, again, with the feasts and the festivals. And it's really an amazing revelation when you come to understanding on it. But again, it's something that is mostly a miss because um, most of the most of the most of the world, the modern world, follows the Gregorian solar calendar. And because that solar calendar never ma- creates or makes exclusion for Chodesh, being the first day and the first Sabbath of each lunar month. And I guess I should emphasize this. Every Chodesh, which again is that 7% waxing crescent moon, that day is the first day, the first Sabbath of every lunar month, but it is not included in the other 4 7-day sabbatical weeks. And so every lunar month has these 4 7-day sabbatical weeks, but it also has this one special new moon Sabbath, the first day of the lunar month, which stands on its own. It's special and it's not counted in the other 4 weekly 7-day Sabbaths. I mean, sabbatical weeks. And so this is very important because unless you understand this, um, it doesn't make sense as to how, I can also go to an image to give you a visual. Let me find an image of what exactly I'm talking about. And I can also, after the first break, I will provide a video which explains this from a group called World's Last Chance, which they do a really good job of explaining the material that I'm referencing this evening, except for we have a little bit of a difference in that they determined that the Chodesh is the evening after the lunar conjunction, which it's not always that. According to the Book of Enoch, the Chodesh is actually the 7% waxing crescent moon, which is not always the evening after the lunar conjunction. And so that's where the only difference that we have. But let me see if I can, because there's an individual that wrote a really good article about this. And if I can find this link, I'll provide it for you before continuing. All right, let's see. And another thing which is very interesting about what I'm speaking about this evening is that, and I want to thank one of my listeners for sharing this with me, but she sent me a link to Philo. For those that don't know, Philo was a contemporary of Yeshua. He lived during the time of Christ. Actually, he was born before Christ came into the world, and he lived after Christ was crucified. And anyways, he also speaks about and shares information about the Luni-solar calendar. and how the Jews of the first century, during the time of Christ, how they followed this particular calendar system. I'm looking for the actual article that that has an image of it, but if I'm not able to find it, I'll still just explain it. What I'll actually do is I'll look for it during the break and see if I can find it. But basically, again, it's the Chodesh is the first day and first Sabbath of the lunar month, and then you have 4 7-day sabbatical weeks. And so, because the Sabbaths align to the phases of the moon, you have these Sabbaths always, every lunar month, occurring on the 1st, the 8th, the 15th, the 22nd, and the 29th day of the lunar month. And it's actually this evening is the 5th Sabbath of the month of Tammuz, which is the Hebrew month that we are currently in. And next month will, well, let me pull it up real quick because I've got, and Kathy placed a link to the calendar that I made of this particular Enochian calendar system. And so I'll explain this according to where we are right now so that you can understand. This Wednesday is the 29th day of Tammuz. And as I said, every 1st, 8th, 15th, 22nd, and 29th, according to the Enochian Lunar Calendar, the ancient Hebrew calendar, is a Sabbath. And so this Wednesday, where we are right now, we are at the lunar conjunction, the 5th Sabbath of this particular month, the month of Tammuz. And then we have tomorrow will be the 30th of Tammuz, and the first day, or actually, this is the last day of the lunar month. Because as I said, the calendar alternates between 29 and 30 days. And then on Friday is the first of Av. The first of Av. It's a new month. And this is Rosh Chodesh, which just means the first day. And this will also be the first Sabbath of the new lunar month. And because Chodesh is on Friday this upcoming month, every Friday from there on, for the next 4 Fridays will be Sabbath. And so this upcoming Friday, the 5th of August, will be the first day of Av, and it will be the first day and the first Sabbath of the lunar month. And then you have 6 days, 6 working days. And then on the 12th of August, which will be the 8th of Av, will be the second Sabbath. And then on the 19th of August, which is the 15th of Av, you have the third Sabbath. And again, these Sabbaths align with the phases of the moon. And so this Friday, the 5th of August, which is the first of Av, will be the 7% crescent moon, the waxing crescent moon. And then on the 12th of August, which is the 8th day of Av, you will have the first quarter moon, and it will align with the second Sabbath. And then on the 19th of August, which is my birthday, incidentally, you have the third Sabbath, which will be a full moon Sabbath. And then on the 26th of August will be the fourth Sabbath, which aligns with the third quarter moon. It will be the 22nd of Av. And then next month, on the 2nd of September, that will be the 29th day of Av and the fifth Sabbath of the lunar month. And so, we'll be right back. All right, welcome back, everybody. I did find a video and also a link to an image that shows the breakdown of this calendar, which, having a visual is greatly beneficial. And in my ninth book, the Flat Earth as Key to Decrypt the Book of Enoch, I elaborate on and provide great detail on this particular calendar system, how it works, its breakdowns, and its connections to the Leviticus 23 feast days. And I also, in that book, provide image, which I'm about to post in the chat room, an image which, will help you to visualize this in more precise manner. All right. And then there's a series of, there's a whole playlist that was created by World's Last Chance, which also talks about this as well. And very interesting to check out. What's up, Mr. Rowe? But again, what I'm gonna do now is share some passages from Exodus and tell you how this lines up with what basically was, the Passover, Feast of Unleavened Bread, they're being released from the bondage of Egypt, and highlight some passages so that you can understand this story in a more precise manner, according to the calendar system which I just described to you. And I will probably, after this show has been archived, actually post links and also pictures which connect to exactly what I'm talking about, so that when you go to actually watch it, the video on YouTube, it will explain in visual what I'm talking about here in audio. And so that will, I think, be greatly beneficial to you. And also, I'll take snippets of the calendar to help you to understand how all this is lining up as well. But all right, let me go ahead and go into the Exodus account. You're welcome, link. All right, and I know that for a lot of people, this may be a seemingly boring subject, but for those of you that are really trying to understand what I'm talking about, this, I believe it to be of very utmost importance. And after the next break, I will share with you the link where you can find Philo's description of exactly what the new moon, which begins the Chodesh, which begins the lunar calendar, because there is debate on this particular topic. Like science, when you look up new moon, it tells you that the new moon is the lunar conjunction. And that new moon day is actually the day that the moon mimics precisely the movement of the sun, because it's during lunar conjunction that the moon rises when the sun rises, crosses the sky as the sun crosses the sky, and then sets when the sun sets. And because it mimics the sun's movement is why we are not able to see it in the sky. And because it is not lit up in any amount of phase, being completely black, and because the sun's brilliance during this particular phase of the moon obstructs our being able to see it, is why during the lunar conjunction the moon appears to be invisible. And it's not that it's invisible, it's just it's mimicking, as I said, the movement of the sun, and therefore is not readily apparent to us in visibility. And it's only after between 46 and 72 hours after the lunar conjunction that it becomes a thin sliver, a waxing crescent moon, and then becomes visible to us again. But again, it's only when the moon is 7% full, which is almost, a full day after the lunar conjunction, that this phase of the moon is counted as the Chodesh, the first day and the first Sabbath of the lunar month, which in the old days, in the ancient times, the Sanhedrin, which was the ruling council of the Pharisees and the church authorities during that time, they had two witnesses which would watch for the sighting of the moon in this proportion. And when they spotted it, they would come and report that they had seen the new moon, the Chodesh, and then the high priest would affirm it, and then the trumpets, the shofars, would be blown all across the land of Israel. And then when the trumpets were sounded, all of the Israelites, the Hebrew people, they would stop whatever they were doing and they would run to the temple. And it was this Chodesh, the determination of Chodesh, which is referenced in scripture as being the time that no man knoweth, the day or the hour. And the reason being is because they were unable to see the lunar conjunction, the moon being in lunar conjunction. And so until it appeared as this waxing crescent, it was called the day that no man knoweth, the day and the hour that no man knoweth. And it's also my opinion that when Christ returns and what people reference as the rapture, that this will occur on the Feast of Trumpets, which his second coming, when he comes again, he will fulfill the 3 remaining fall feasts. And because if you do not know, during his first coming, Christ, Yeshua, was the Passover lamb. And then he was placed into the tomb on the very next day. And then he resurrected on the morrow after the Sabbath, according to Leviticus 23, which is the day, the celebration of the festival of first fruits, where the priest would make a wave offering. He would offer a sheaf of barley as first fruits to the Most High God. And that was the day that Christ was resurrected, and he resurrected with him the patriarchs, Adam to the thief on the cross, that were in Abraham's bosom and that were waiting in Sheol for him to release them. And this is called the first resurrection. And when he did that, he offered up Adam and all of the Hebrew patriarchs to the Most High God, to the Father, as the first fruits, which is why it says in scriptures that Christ was the first fruits of the resurrected dead. And then after his resurrection, it was 50 days after, on the Feast of Pentecost, on Shavuot, that the Holy Spirit came upon the apostles, and that then they were then heard speaking in tongues, and the people, all the people from different countries and nations, were able to hear them preaching in their own tongue, which is, why they call it speaking in tongues. But anyways, and so Christ in his first coming fulfilled the spring and the summer feasts. And then with his second coming, he will return again on the Feast of Trumpets, which will be the first of Tishri. It's always the first day of Tishri because, again, Chodesh, when they see the waxing crescent moon, that's when the shofar is blown. That's when the ram's horns are blown all across the nation of Israel. And again, that's when all the people, the Israelites, come running to the temple for the celebration of the new moon Sabbath. And so that will be the gathering of the church. And then the wrath of God is poured out on the wicked. And then on 10 days after the Feast of Trumpets, on the Day of Atonement, you will have Christ taking the judgment seat. Now, this isn't a literal 9 days. I don't know how much time has passed before this event occurs, but he will take the judgment seat on the Day of Atonement. And then 5 days after that, on what is the 15th of the 15th of Tishri. And remember, every 15th, just like the Feast of Unleavened Bread is always on the 15th of Nisan, that 15th is the third Sabbath, the full moon Sabbath. Every 15th of the lunar month is a full moon Sabbath. And so on the Feast of Tabernacles, that's when, after the Day of Atonement, where Christ takes the judgment seat, and then he judges and separates the harvest, the wheat and the tares, the righteous from the wicked, the goat from the sheep. And then on the 15th, on the Feast of Tabernacles, that's when the righteous are allowed to enter into New Jerusalem as, their return to their first estate. That's when they're allowed to enter into paradise, a return to paradise. And then the tares are sent for condemnation. They will be burned up, destroyed, annihilated, as if they had never been. All right, so let me go ahead and go into this. And if you want to follow along, I'm going to be reading from Exodus chapter 12. Because let me first explain this, that before this calendar system was restored to the ancient Israelites, that Tishri in the fall, the Feast of Trumpets, that it is called Rosh Hashanah. And the reason being is because this was when the Jewish New Year, or the Hebrew New Year, began, was on the Feast of Trumpets, the first day of Tishri, Tishri 1, which was always the Chodesh, the 7% waxing crescent moon. But when the Israelites were led from the bondage of Egypt, it occurred on what is referenced as the month of Abib, which the month of Abib, which means green ears, it's the month when the barley harvest is, coming to fruition. That is the month of Nisan, which always occurs in March, and the first day of March is the vernal equinox, and that is when that's what begins. Right around there is what begins the month of Nisan, and it always falls in line with the barley harvest, because the way that the lunar calendar is set up is it because it's alternating 29 and 30 days, the lunar year is only 354 days. And so every year it is 10 days short of what is the 364 days of the Enochian solar calendar year. And so 7 years out of 19, the Israelites add a month, which if you were to actually purchase my calendar or to look at the calendar, you'll see that this year was one of the years that they added at the end of the 12 lunar month calendar. They added another month called Adar 2, which Adar is the last month of the Hebrew calendar. And every few years, almost every 3 years, they have to add another lunar month in order to balance out the barley feast with Passover, because you always have to have the barley becoming ripe before Passover can occur. And so at the end of the year, the Sanhedrin, the Levite priests, they would go out into the field and look to see if the barley was going to be ripe for Passover. And if it wasn't, then they would add a month, a lunar month of Adar 2. And then that would realign the lunar calendar according to the barley harvest. And so it's really an ingenious system, because they just add, rather than adding a day like we do every 4 years to the 28 days of February, they just add another month. And so, it's called the metatonic cycle, but every 7 years out of 19, it is necessary for a month to be added. And so on my calendar, you'll see that there is an Adar 1 and an Adar 2 before the month of Nisan. And that was because, again, they had to add a month to this year in order to realign the lunar year with the passing of the solar calendar as well, to align it all together. And so Exodus, and if you have any questions, just put them in the chat room. I'll check here in just a minute, but I want to go ahead and begin this. Exodus 12, it says, "And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. Speak ye unto all the congregation of Israel, saying, In the 10th day of this month they shall take to them every man a lamb, according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for an house." So he's talking to them about establishing Passover. And so this month began, the month of Abib is what it describes it in Exodus, but this is also called the month of Nisan. And so this is what begins the calendar, because the ancient Hebrew calendar is a linear progression of seasons from you have spring, then summer, then fall, and winter. And spring always begins with the day of the vernal equinox. Summer begins with the summer solstice. Fall begins with the autumnal equinox, and um, winter begins with the winter solstice. And so that's how God's calendar is established as far as the seasons. And so now in Exodus, he's telling them about what will come to be known and celebrated in memorial as Passover. And that he tells them to set aside a lamb. In verse 5, your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year. You shall take it out from the sheep or from the goats, and you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month, which is the month of Nisan. And the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening. And so, in the evening, there's a differentiation between the day and the evening. And I used to think that it was that a day was counted from the evening until the evening and the morning, and that was a day. But I have since learned in looking at and studying this that a day is actually begins with dawn, and that when you celebrate Sabbath, it is only celebrated from dawn, from the morning until sunset. And then when the sun sets, that actually ends Sabbath. And the evening, even though it's still, the evening is something different, even though it's still the same day. It is not counted as Sabbath. And I'll prove that when we come back from this break and as we continue through this particular story, because it's very precise in when the Most High told him to celebrate the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Feast of Passover, and when they were led out of the bondage of Egypt. All right, we'll be right back. All right, welcome back, everybody. Really quick, I wanted to share with you. Let me check to make sure I can get this, but I was informed that as a fundraiser for this month, that Revolution Radio is offering for a $50 donation and a $60 donation. I believe it was a pound of chocolate fudge and or chocolate covered fudge cashews for for supporting the network. But I don't see the message right here right now. So if you want to know more, I would contact Nighthawk or one of the one of the producers in the chat room have more information as to the details on this particular And I believe it will be ongoing through this particular month as fundraising efforts to support the network. Those of you that can, even if you wanted to just donate $5 or $10, please do go to freedomslips.com, click on the donate button, and help us to stay on the air and coming to you with all the truth that we do in the ways that we do, and know that we appreciate you before. All right, so I want to get back to the Enochian calendar. And as I said, I'm going to confirm by the story of Exodus as to how Sabbath breaks down. And I used to believe that Sabbath, was both the evening and the morning, and that would make up a Sabbath. But having done this research and in doing the study that I'm presenting to you now, I now understand that Sabbath is only um, from dawn to dusk. And I'll prove this to you because the Most High never breaks his own Sabbath. And according to the way that the story of Exodus is lined up, that you have them celebrating Passover, and then it was at midnight after they ate the Passover meal. It was at midnight that the angel of death went across Egypt and slaughtered all the firstborn, including the cattle, the firstborn of the cattle. And then it was during that evening that Pharaoh summoned Moses and told him that he was going to free them. But then on the 15th in the morning, when the sun rose, that began the Sabbath. The 15th was the Sabbath, and that was the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And so and it wasn't until the evening that they were released. And if Sabbath is both the day and the night, well, then the Most High, Yahweh Elohim, would be breaking his own Sabbath, because it was in the evening of the 15th that they were then ordered to march out of Egypt. And so I'll prove that to you right now with this particular story. All right, so we were talking about the Israelites preparing a lamb for slaughter, a lamb without spot or blemish, which, again, this is a type, uh, just like with Yeshua. When he was crucified, he was the Passover lamb without sin, without spot or blemish. And he was crucified on right before sunset. And it was at sunset um, that 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 they, after they entombed him, but he died on Passover. And so, and then being entombed, he was entombed on the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and then he was resurrected 3 days later on what is referenced in Leviticus as the morrow after the Sabbath, which is when the wave offering, where the high priest makes a wave offering for the Israelites as a sin offering for forgiveness. And that is with the first crop, the barley crop, to come to, that to come to the first crop that was ripened, and that it was a winter crop, but it was the first spring crop to actually produce. All right, and so let's go ahead and pick up the story with verse number 6. And you shall keep it up until the 14th day of the same month, and the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening. All right, and so Passover began on the 14th of Nisan in the morning, and then they were to kill the lamb in the evening, and then to sprinkle the blood on the doorpost. Verse 7. And they shall take of the blood and strike it on the two side posts and on the upper doorpost of the houses, wherein they shall eat it. And they shall eat the flesh in that night. So it's in the evening that they are feasting and eating the Passover meal. Roast with fire and unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. Eat not of it raw, nor sodden at all with water, but roast with fire his head with his legs, and with the pertinence thereof. Verse 10. And ye shall let nothing of it remain until the morning, and that which remaineth of it until the morning ye shall burn with fire. So after they eat the Passover meal, when the morning came, which was the feast of unleavened bread, then they were to offer up what was left of the Passover meal, the lamb, as a burnt offering to Yahweh, to the Most High God. All right, continuing. And thus shall you eat it, with your loins girded, your shoes on your feet, and your staff in your hand, and you shall eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. So he's telling them to be ready to move, that you're going to celebrate the Passover, but be ready to go, because, they're going to be freed from the bondage of Egypt. Verse 12. For I will pass through the land of Egypt this night. And it actually says somewhere that it was at midnight that he would smite the firstborn. And will smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord. And the blood shall be to you for a token upon the houses where you are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and the plague shall not be upon you to destroy you, when I smite the land of Egypt. Verse 14. And this day shall be unto you for a memorial, and you shall keep it a feast to the Lord throughout your generations. You shall keep it a feast by an ordinance forever. And so that doesn't say until my son comes and being incarnated in the flesh, then you don't worry about it anymore. No, it says forever. Ye shall keep it a feast to the Lord throughout your generations, meaning, as even our generation, throughout your generation, ye shall keep it a feast by an ordinance forever, meaning that we are also under the law to celebrate Passover. All right, now the particulars of it, how to celebrate it. 7 days shall ye eat unleavened bread. Even the first day ye shall put away leaven out of your houses. For whosoever eateth leavened bread from the first day until the 7th day, that soul shall be cut off from Israel. All right, so notice that on the 15th, which, as I said, every 15th is a full moon Sabbath. And so what more perfect day for the Israelites to travel at night than on the full moon Sabbath? Well, on the full moon after the Sabbath, which again, the Sabbath is from dawn till dusk. And then in the evening, they were able to travel by the full moon. I mean, it can't be any better. And also notice that the spring feasts fall exactly in line with the fall feasts. Well, sorta, in that the Feast of Unleavened Bread is a 7-day festival which begins on the 15th of Nisan. And in the fall, you have the Feast of Tabernacles. It also begins on the 15th of Tishri and continues for 7 days. All right. So it begins on a Sabbath and then it continues for for 6 more days. And then you have another Sabbath occurring on the 22nd. All right. Continuing. I'm not going to read all of this, but I do want to highlight the main portions so that you will see how what is being told as far as story in Exodus, it only can be made sense of when you understand how it falls in line with the Enochian Lunar Solar Calendar. It is only with this calendar that the Sabbaths always fall on the 1st, the 8th, the 15th, the 22nd, the 29th. The Gregorian calendar does not fall in line with Sabbath on those days. Sabbath can be any day of the week on the Gregorian calendar, and any number as far as, the day of the month. It can be any number of the particular day of the month as well. All right, continuing. And in the first day there shall be an holy convocation, and in the 7th day there shall be a holy convocation to you. No manner of work shall be done in them, save that which every man must eat, and that only may be done of you. Verse 17, and ye shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, for in this same day have I brought your armies out of the land of Egypt. Therefore shall ye observe this day in your generations by an ordinance forever. Okay, so he's telling you right here that it is on the feast of unleavened bread, which is the 15th of Nisan, that they were led out of Egypt. And so if both day and night are Sabbath, how does that work? The Most High God would be breaking his the observance of Sabbath. He would be breaking his own commandment. But unless you understand that Sabbath is only in the daytime from dawn to dusk, that's the only way that this story can make sense. All right, let's continue and then I'll prove it to you. Verse 18. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month, at evening time, when the day is over, ye shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day, the 21st day of the month at evening. So he's telling them from the 14th, which is Passover, until the 21st day of the month, which is the day before the 22nd, is the next, the third quarter Sabbath. It always falls on the 22nd. So he's telling them, for these 7 days you shall eat nothing but unleavened bread. 7 days shall there be no leaven found in your house. And notice that he said from evening to evening. For whosoever eateth that which is leavened, even that soul shall be cut off from the congregation of Israel, whether he be stranger or born in the land. Verse 20, you shall eat nothing leavened. In all your habitations shall ye eat unleavened bread. All right. Verse 21. Then Moses called for all the elders of Israel and said unto them, draw out and take you a lamb according to your families, and kill the Passover. And ye shall take a bunch of hyssop and dip it in the blood that is in the basin, and strike the lintel and the 2 side posts with the blood that is in the basin, and none of you shall go out of the door of his house until the morning. Okay? So the Passover is from evening till morning. And it wasn't safe for them to venture out of the house until the morning time, because Passover was over when the sun rose. And when the sun rose, that began the 15th, the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Verse 23. For the Lord will pass through to smite the Egyptians, and when he seeth the blood upon the lintel and on the two side posts, the Lord will pass over the door and will not suffer the destroyer to come in unto your houses to smite you. And ye shall observe this thing for an ordinance to thee and to thy sons forever, meaning that you shall honor Passover as a memorial forever. Not until Jesus comes, Yeshua comes, but forever. And it shall come to pass when ye be come to the land which the Lord will give you according as he hath promised, that ye shall keep this service. All right. I'm going to skip down some. We're going to skip to verse 29. And it came to pass that at midnight, the Lord smote all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh that sat on his throne, unto the firstborn of the captive that was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of cattle. And then, notice, and it was after midnight, and Pharaoh rose up in the night, he and all his servants and all the Egyptians, and there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where there was not one dead. And he called for Moses. So Moses, went to him that night after midnight, which he wouldn't have been able to do this if he had called him after sunrise, because sunrise was a Sabbath. And he called for Moses and Aaron by night and said, Rise up and get ye forth from among my people, both ye and the children of Israel, and go serve the Lord as ye have said. Also take your flocks and your herds, as you have said, and be gone, and bless me also. All right, so he told them after midnight on the Passover to leave, that I want you to get all your stuff, all your people, all your possessions, and go. All right, but notice now when they actually leave, it's not during the daytime. It isn't until the evening time, because the daytime from dawn to dusk is Sabbath, and the Most High is not going to break his own ordinance to honor the Sabbath. And you'll notice that it's in the evening time on the 15th of Nisan, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is Sabbath, but it's only from dawn to dusk. In the evening time, that's when they leave and they begin their exodus. So let me skip to that part. All right, verse 41. And it came to pass at the end of the 430 years, even the selfsame day, it came to pass that all the hosts of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. It is a night, notice, it is a night to be much observed unto the Lord, for bringing them out from the land of Egypt. This is that night of the Lord to be observed of all the children of Israel in their generations. And so it tells you right there that on the 15th, on the Feast of Unleavened Bread, at night, that's when the Most High led them out of Egypt. That's when Moses took them out of Egypt. They celebrated the Feast of Unleavened Bread from dawn to dusk, and then that evening they left. They began their exodus during what was the full moon Sabbath, the third Sabbath of the lunar month, the full moon Sabbath. All right, let's continue to verse 48. And when a stranger shall sojourn with thee and will keep the Passover to the Lord, let all his males. Oh, this is talking about how circumcision became an institution, and also how the uh, setting aside of the firstborn, that after Passover, whenever the Israelites had children, that the firstborn was always offered unto the Most High God, whether cattle, whether a human son, child, however, that the firstborn was always congregated and given to the Most High God. All right, skipping down to verse 51. And it came to pass the selfsame day that the Lord did bring the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt by their armies. And so this was the feast of unleavened bread. Now let's go to Exodus 13, because I've got, oh man, all right, I'm gonna have to go through this a little bit faster. All right, verse 3, Exodus 13. And Moses said unto the people, remember this day in which ye came out from Egypt, out of the house of bondage, for by strength of hand the Lord brought you out from this place. There shall no leavened bread be eaten. This day came ye out in the month of Abib. And so this, as I said, Abib means green ears. It's the first month of the season of spring. It's also now called the month of Nisan. All right, I'm going to skip down just a little bit. Verse 10. Thou shalt therefore keep this ordinance in his season from year to year. And so these celebrations, Passover, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Day of First Fruits, they all became instituted feasts of the Most High God. All right, we're going to skip down. Verse 18. But God led the people about through the way of the wilderness of the Red Sea, and the children of Israel went up harnessed out of the land of Egypt. Verse 21. And the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of a cloud to lead them the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, to go by day and night. He took not away the pillar of the cloud by day, nor the pillar of fire by night from before the people. Exodus 14, verse 13. Actually, I'm going to skip just a little bit more. All right, we'll be right back for final segment. All right, welcome back, everybody. This will be final segment, and I should have just enough time to get through what I want to cover in this particular segment, which is the quail and the manna. Because when you look at and you see how the manna and the quail are given to the people, to Israel, when they were murmuring against Moses about, starving and also um, being thirsty in the desert, the Most High feeds them with manna and also with the quail. But he only gives it to them. Well, first, he sends the quail on the first day. It's the Sabbath. But he won't send it to them during the daytime, which is the Sabbath, because they are not to go out and to gather food. Same thing with the manna. Um, you'll notice when I read from the story that he begins to send them the quail in the evening time on the Sabbath, on the day of the Sabbath. But it's, again, it's only Sabbath is only from dawn to dusk. And then as far as the manna, he sends it to them for 6 days. And then they are only to gather what they are able to eat. And and no more, because if they have any remaining, then it will gather worms. And then, but on the sixth day, they are to gather twice as much for that particular day, and then what will be the seventh day, which is the Sabbath. And they're not to gather anything on the Sabbath day. Again, it's only by understanding how um, the this particular story aligns with the lunar calendar, which after the um, every seventh day after the Chodesh is a lunar Sabbath. And you'll notice that in the story that they arrive um, to Mount Sinai in the wilderness on the 15th, 1 month after they had left um, Egypt and began the Exodus, which was in the evening on the 15th of Nisan, which again, the 15th of Nisan during the day, that's a Sabbath. And then they left Egypt in the evening time during the full moon, and then they arrived here in Mount Sinai 1 month later, also on the 15th. And then with the story, um, this being a Sabbath, they are at rest, they're not traveling. And then in the evening time, because they are hungry, the Most High tells Moses to tell them that I'm going to send you quail in the evening time. And then after that, I'm going to start sending you manna, but it will begin on the first day. So he sends them quail in the evening on the Sabbath, and then the very next day begins he begins to send them for 6 days the manna, the hidden manna. And so this shows you that, again, the 15th is a Sabbath, and then you have 6 days, 6 working days, and then on the seventh day, on the 22nd, that also is a Sabbath. And then you'll see the cycle repeated, um, that there's no manna sent on the seventh day, but then on the first day, one measure is sent all the way to the sixth day, and then on the sixth day, 2 measures of manna are sent um, for the sixth day and also for the seventh day, which is Sabbath. And so that would be the 29th, and that is also Sabbath. And so it's only according to the Enochian Lunar Solar Calendar that um, you can explain how the quail and the manna and Exodus, as far as the Passover, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Day of First Fruits, how all of these things fit together with the same calendar, because it only fits with the Enochian Ancient Hebrew Lunar Solar Calendar that I, gave you the link for, that Kathy has provided you the link for. Um, and just as I said earlier in the show, today is Sabbath. Today is the fifth Sabbath of the month of Tammuz. And then this Friday will be the first, it's Chodesh. This upcoming Friday in 2 days is the beginning of the Chodesh, the first day and lunar Sabbath of the month of Av, AV. And then, Sabbath next month will fall on Friday for the whole month of August. And so it helps to have the actual calendar before you so you can look at all of what I'm talking about. But it's only by utilizing this calendar can you keep up with Sabbath and also with the feasts of the Lord. And so, I mean, do you want to follow a calendar which isn't correct and not honor the Sabbath as we are commanded to do? Or do you want to be precise and follow according to the calendar that the Most High gave us? So it's all up to you. And now that you've listened to me and heard this show and know about this calendar system and how it works, you can no longer claim ignorance or innocence. Now that you know better, different and better, it's your choice to follow it or not. All right, Exodus 16, verse 1. And they took their journey from Elim, and all the congregation of the children of Israel came unto the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after their departing out of the land of Egypt. All right, verse 4. Then said the Lord unto Moses, Behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a certain rate every day, that I may prove them whether they will walk in my law or no. And it shall come to pass that on the 6th day they shall prepare that which they bring in, and it shall be twice as much as they gather daily. All right, I skipped the part where they were murmuring about how hungry they were, but I just want to highlight those passages which are connected to what I'm talking to you, what I've been telling you. All right. And in the morning then ye shall see the glory of the Lord, for that he heareth your murmurings against the Lord. And what are we that ye murmur against us? Verse 8, and Moses said, This shall be when the Lord shall give you in the evening flesh to eat, and in the morning bread to the full. So he's talking about in the evening, the 15th, the same day, that after the Sabbath is done, when the sun goes down, in the evening time, he's going to send the quail so that they can eat. And then, beginning the very next day, on the first day of the next sabbatical week, he's going to start sending them manna from heaven. All right, so I'll read that again. This shall be when the Lord shall give you in the evening flesh to eat, and in the morning bread to the full, for that the Lord heareth your murmurings which ye murmur against him. And what are we? Your murmurings are not against us, but against the Lord. And Moses spake unto Aaron, saying unto all the congregation of the children of Israel, Come near before the Lord, for he hath heard your murmurings. And it came to pass, as Aaron spake unto the whole congregation of the children of Israel, that they looked toward the wilderness, and behold, the glory of the Lord appeared in the cloud. All right. Verse 11. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, I have heard the murmurings of the children of Israel, speak unto them, saying, At evening, at even, ye shall eat flesh, and in the morning ye shall be filled with bread, and ye shall know that I am the Lord your God. And it came to pass that at evening the quails came up and covered the camp. That's verse 13. And in the morning the dew lay round about the host. So, let's check this again. Verse 14. Actually, let me go back to verse 13, because this is where the quail are sent, and then we'll get to verse 14. All right, verse 13. And it came to pass that at evening the quails came up and covered the camp, and in the morning the dew lay round about the host. Verse 14. And when the dew that lay was gone up, behold, upon the face of the wilderness there lay a small round thing, as small as the hoarfrost on the ground. And when the children of Israel saw it, they said one to another, It is manna. For they wist not what it was. And Moses said unto them, This is the bread which the Lord hath given you to eat. So in that morning after the Sabbath, that began the 6-day count to the next Sabbath, which was on the 7th day, the 22nd. which again, as I said, according to the ancient Hebrew Enochian Lunar Calendar, all the Sabbaths fall on the 1st, the 8th, the 15th, the 22nd, and the 29th. And so the fact that all the feasts and the festivals align with these particular dates, specifically the 15th as being the Feast of Unleavened Bread, it verifies exactly what I'm telling you and what I'm talking about. All right, continuing, verse 18. And when they did meet it with an omer, he that gathered much had nothing over, and he that gathered little had no lack. They gathered every man according to his eating. Verse 22. And it came to pass that on the 6th day they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers for one man. And all the rulers of the congregation came and told Moses. And he said unto them, This is that which the Lord hath said. Tomorrow is the rest, the holy Sabbath unto the Lord. Bake that which ye will bake today, and seeth that ye will seethe. And that which remaineth over lay up for you to be kept until the morning. And they laid it up till the morning as Moses bade, and it did not stink, neither was there any worms thereon. So remember, the 6 days previous to this particular Sabbath day, the day before the Sabbath, whenever they tried to keep more than an omer for each man, it would start to stink. The manna would start to stink, and there would be worms in it. But on the 6th day, they were able to keep twice as much, 2 omers full, and it didn't stink and it didn't get worms in it. And the reason being is because the Most High was allowing them to keep an omer for the Sabbath, for the day of rest. I mean, it's just supernatural. I mean, he is absolutely confirming with the quail and with the manna that this is how the Enochian Lunar Solar Calendar works. And they laid it up till the morning as Moses bade, and it did not stink, neither was there any worm therein. And Moses said, Eat that today, for today is a Sabbath unto the Lord. Today ye shall not find it in the field. 6 days ye shall gather it, but on the 7th day, which is the Sabbath, in it there shall be none. And it came to pass that there went out some of the people on the 7th day for to gather, and they found none. They found none. So they didn't believe Moses. They went out to try to get more manna, and there was none to be gotten. And the Lord said unto Moses, How long refuse ye to keep my commandments and my laws? Because he told them not to go out on the Sabbath, but to rest, and they didn't listen. They're so hard-headed. See, for that the Lord hath given you the Sabbath, therefore he giveth you on the 6th day the bread of 2 days. Abide ye every man in his place. Let no man go out of his place on the 7th day. So the people rested on the 7th day. And the house of Israel called the name thereof manna, and it was like coriander seed white, and the taste of it was like wafers made with honey. Well, there you go. I just wanted to do this study, and I'm glad that I was able to get it done. And it's basically showing you how the story of Exodus, along with the story of the hidden manna and the quail, and as well as when they were led out of Egypt, it affirms that Sabbath is from dawn to dusk, and that also that every 15th is a Sabbath. Every 22nd is a Sabbath. The 7th day. The 29th is a Sabbath. The first, Chodesh, the first day of the lunar month, is the first day and the first Sabbath of the lunar month. The 7% waxing crescent moon. And then the first quarter moon is on the 8th, the second Sabbath. The full moon on the 15th is the third Sabbath. The third quarter moon on the 22nd is the fourth Sabbath. And the lunar conjunction, which is the the dark moon on the 29th, is the fifth Sabbath. And then you have, because you're not able to see the lunar conjunction moon, you have what is referenced in scripture as the day that no man knoweth the day or the hour. And so, and then when the moon became visible and was actually more than 7% full, then you were able to, that was the Chodesh, and that was the first day of the lunar month and the first Sabbath. And it's that day that lines up the other 4 7-day sabbatical weeks. And so that's how it that's how you can make sense of the of the calendar and follow Sabbath. Also, know that it is not necessary. Um, as far as those of you that are trying to follow the how to determine when Sabbath occurs, that you can just look up a lunar calendar according to the percentages of the moon, and you can determine when Sabbath is according to the percentages of the moon. And so, I mean, you don't, or as I gave you that particular website, you can go there and keep up with it online. It's not necessary to buy that calendar that I created. I did that just so people can have a visual reference, like you put a Gregorian calendar on the wall and you can keep up with every day. It tells you exactly what day it is. And as I said, today is the 29th day of Tammuz, the year 5776 in the Hebrew calendar. It's the fifth Sabbath of the month of Tammuz, being the third day of August, the year 2016. And so my calendar makes it very simple to see and also to learn the Hebrew names of each month and to keep up with how, what day of the month it is and when the Sabbaths occur, um, which of course is depending on what Sabbath it is, you can tell what phase of the moon it is. And so, you don't have to get the calendar to do this, but you have to understand the calendar system in order to be able to look online and to look at a lunar calendar with the percentages of the moon, the phases of the moon, to determine exactly what day it is. And, those calendars don't tell you the name of the Hebrew month or the particular day of the month that it is, but you can determine Chodesh according to that particular calendar. And then if you keep up with it in that way, you're able to keep up with it. But it's not easy, especially for those that don't understand how the calendar is laid out and how the system, you know, um, perpetuates itself. And so I made this calendar in order to make it easy for those that are wanting to honor Sabbath and to maintain um, alignment with the days as they are unfolding, so that you can then celebrate, which we have coming up in September, the Feast of Trumpets, the Day of Atonement, and the Feast of Tabernacles. And unless you know how the calendar is laid out, you will not be able to make determination as to when to celebrate those particular feast days. And so, if it's important to you, then those of you that are wanting to honor those days in the way that the Most High established for us, then, this is something that can help you to do that. In September, you have Rosh Chodesh beginning on September 1st. September 4th. And so in the month of September, you'll have Sabbath occurring on Sunday. And so the Christians will actually be right that month. Imagine that. They will actually be right for five Sabbaths in a row. The Sunday, the 4th of September, the 11th of September will be the second Sabbath. The 18th of September, the third Sabbath, and the 25th of September, the fourth Sabbath. And then on Sunday, October 2nd, will be the last Sabbath of that particular month. And then you have the next month, the Rosh Chodesh Tishri, beginning on Monday, the 3rd. And that's, it will be then that 10 days after that's the Feast of Tabernacles. And then you have 10 days after the Day of Atonement, and on the 15th, the Feast of Tabernacles. All right. God bless all. Good night.
Welcome to Momentary Zen with Zen Garcia. Visit www.fallenangels.tv. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
My friends and I come from far Arden with secretive words dangled like jewels for your careless pleasure. The grand highway is crowded with lovers and searchers and leavers, so eager to please and forget. Welcome, friends. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. And I'm honored to be here with you this evening for the next 2 hours as we discuss all things esoteric. Specifically, this evening, I want to clarify and speak about the determination of Sabbath, the feasts, and the festivals according to the exodus of Sabbath, and how the Most High God had delivered to Moses and the Israelites during that time, had given them the Enochian Lunar Calendar, which few know about and even fewer adhere to. And I discovered this and was led to this revelation in studying the book of Enoch, the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries, which was the focus of my 9th book, The Flat Earth as Key to Decrypt the Book of Enoch. And in studying and reviewing those particular passages on the motions of the sun and the moon, I was led to understanding as to how the sun, the moon, and the other celestial luminaries take part in what is basically a giant clockwork, that the heavens are established and set up to be a timekeeping mechanism for the monitor and the maintenance of not only passing time, but also the Sabbath, and also the feast and festivals as laid out in Leviticus chapter 23. And this is something that, even though many of you being biblical scholars, unless you have familiarity with what I'm speaking about with regard to the Luni-solar calendar and how it works, it will escape you to make sense of what exactly the Most High is referencing in the Exodus, because it was during that time when the Israelites were freed. The second Sabbath, the full moon, the third Sabbath, the third quarter moon, the fourth Sabbath, and the lunar conjunction, the fifth Sabbath. And this is the way it is every month on God's calendar, which, according to the Gregorian Solar Calendar, um, the months, some months have 31 days, other months have 28 days. And so there's no congruency. But on God's calendar, no month ever exceeds 30 days. And no month is shorter than 29 days. And again, it's because that's how long it takes the moon to cycle through its four phases. 29.531 days on average. And so, anyways, I just want to explain this just a little bit. Hello, Patrick and Monkey, and so that when I go to actually reading some of the scriptures from Exodus, that you will understand this will be a background, a foundation for helping you to understand what I'm going to be speaking about this evening. Because once we go through this particular day, you'll understand how it is that the Most High gave them this calendar, and also how it aligns with not only scripture, but with the feasts and the festivals. And it's really an amazing revelation when you come to understanding on it. But again, it's something that is mostly a miss, because most of the world, the modern world, follows the Gregorian solar calendar. And because that solar calendar never creates or makes exclusion for Chodesh, being the first day and the first Sabbath of each lunar month. And I guess I should emphasize this. Every Chodesh, which again is that 7% waxing crescent moon, that day is the first day, the first Sabbath of every lunar month. But it is not included in the other 4 7-day sabbatical weeks. And so every lunar month has these 4 7-day sabbatical weeks, but it also has this one special new moon Sabbath, the first day of the lunar month, which stands on its own. It's special, and it's not counted in the other 4 weekly 7-day Sabbaths. Sabbatical weeks. And so this is very important, because unless you understand that, for the Day of Atonement. But anyways, and for a lot of people that believe that Yeshua came and did away with the Old Testament law, he actually came and fulfilled it. Not only did he fulfill it, but he will come, his second coming will fulfill the second half of the feasts and the festivals as laid out in Leviticus chapter 23. And so he actually honored the the Sabbath and also the feast and festivals as laid out by Yahweh Elohim, the Most High God, in the early books of the Torah. And so, well, welcome everybody. It's good to be here with you. RBN, Sister Kathy, always a pleasure to share time with you. Comfortably Numb, Wanderer, RBN, Zaphod, Zippy, Link, Blues Girl, and April. All those that are not in the immediate scroll. Stephanie, Herbal Fuzz, Suri, Rio, um, and all those that are sitting in the background. It's good to share time with you, and again, I think this is a very important teaching in that we are commanded through the fourth commandment, which, of the 10. um, I think it's very important to honor the Most High in the way that He told us to do so. And for most people that don't understand and don't know, and that go to church every Sunday thinking that, they are honoring the Sabbath, or for those that go to church on Saturday as the Seventh day Adventists, or like the modern day Jews that celebrate Sabbath as from Friday at sundown to Saturday at sundown. According to this ancient calendar system, all of them are incorrect. And the reason being is because they all monitor and determine Sabbath according to the Julian Gregorian Solar Calendar, which um, basically aligns every sabbatical week back to back to back to back, meaning that the 7 day weeks, which are named according to the pagan gods, the celestial deities, as the hierarchy for the names of the week, um, they don't work like that according to the ancient Hebrew calendar. In fact, the ancient Hebrew calendar is aligned by the phases of the moon. And the very first day and the first Sabbath of each lunar month is situated according to what is called Chodesh. And Chodesh, meaning time of the new moon, is basically aligned to what people see as the very first sliver of crescent, a waxing crescent moon that is at least 7% full. And so this what's called a lot of times as a horn sliver, that this phase of moon begins the lunar month on God's calendar. And because um, God's calendar is aligned to the four phases of the moon, the monthly phases and cycles of the moon, it alternates in, as far as the days of the month, it alternates 29 days one month, 30 days the other month, and back and forth and vice versa. And the reason it does so is because the average, what is called the synodic month, the average um, for the moon to cycle through all four of its phases is 29.531 days. And so God had established this particular calendar system ingeniously to align with that particular average. And so when you understand that the Sabbaths are lined up according to the phases of the moon, you know that every Sabbath, the first Sabbath will always be that 7% waxing crescent moon. And then you have 6 days, and on the 8th of every lunar month, another Sabbath. And that Sabbath aligns with the first quarter moon. And then you have 6 more working days and another Sabbath, and that Sabbath aligns with the full moon. And then you have 6 more working days, and then the third Sabbath, which lines up with the third quarter moon. And then 6 more working days, and then the fifth Sabbath, which aligns with the lunar conjunction. And so every lunar month, according to God's calendar, lines up according to those phases of the moon. And so it becomes very simple to keep up with and to maintain and to keep track a Sabbath. All one has to do is go out and look at the phases of the moon. And then you know that on Chodesh, that's the beginning, the 7% waxing crescent moon, that's the beginning of the lunar month. And then the first quarter moon is as people from the bondage of Egypt and the burden of being slaves unto Pharaoh and the Egyptians, that they were not only reestablished as the Most High's chosen, but that he had also given to them the Torah as the law, but also this particular calendar system, which I'm speaking about. And it's something that is a miss. It's, as far as modern humanity, it is something that is forgotten, lost, and forbidden knowledge. And this teaching and this knowledge is especially important for those that are wanting to honor the fourth commandment and also to celebrate the Most High as he had commanded us to do according to his own word and works. And so I'm going to bring this forth to light for people, and I'm also going to help you to understand exactly how this lines up according to these particular passages, but also, how it unfolds. And for those of you that are familiar with my work and that have studied and kept up with the information that I released, you know that I've also made a particular calendar specifically to assist those of you that are wanting to adhere to the calendar as given to us by God, because he most certainly did give us this one specific calendar system, and he delivered it to Moses, and I'm going to verify and I'm going to prove that this evening. And once you understand that this is most certainly the calendar system which the ancient Hebrews abided by, well, then you can then understand why it is that one should use it as determination, or as the system for determining the Sabbaths, and also for determining on which days to honor and to celebrate the Levitical feast days, meaning Passover, unleavened bread, the day of first fruits, Shavuot, which is Pentecost, the Feast of Tabernacles, the Day of Atonement, and also the Feast of Trumpets. which that one should have been before.